It says he represents the Tanaka clan. You don't look like Tanaka. Welcome to Hey Guys Podcast. I'm Rob, this is Liam, and this week we watched 1988's Bloodsport, based on the real-life story, real life in quotations, of Frank Dux, a man trained in the ancient art of ninjutsu to enter the secretive Kumite. Well, I say secretive because apparently everyone and their dog knows about this fucking tournament. To be fair, there is not much else to say about Bloodsport. Guy enters competition, Guy fights eclectic mix of fighters, Guy's new best friend gets hurt, and Guy fights the big bad. I mean, I'm still not sure why Bolo Young is the enemy. All the while, he's being hunted by two of the most inept army officers I've ever seen. Before we begin talking about this film, Liam, can I tell you the real-life story of Frank Dux? Because we need to get that out at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, the Frank Dux things is amazing. I mean, I love like those end credit sequence when it's basically just like, it feels like a 7-year-old wrote it about himself. Yeah. It's like, I fought 700 guys in a row and I had the fastest punch and I do the strongest kick. It's like, right, I actually think it might be the most 80s thing of anything because you would never get away with that. Like one of the things I love about these like 80s films is that I've always said, it's like, oh, you know, if you take a film like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, you'd never get that anymore because we're too cynical. You know, It's just you couldn't get that sense of humor anymore. It'd be too much wink, wink. You also wouldn't get this movie. It just wouldn't happen because you would immediately fact check this lunatic. The guy's just come in and said, yeah, so there's this underground tournament. I beat up 700 guys. I'm like the fastest ever. I was in the CIA. I was in the army. And somebody's just, you know, the usual thing, just finishing off the 8th line of coke and going, yeah, that all fucking sounds like we should turn this into a movie. Well, it's ludicrous.
He wrote a book about it as well. So let me tell you a story, right? So, and it starts off with, according to Dux.
Yeah, everything is according to just Dux, no doubt.
A ninjutsu expert named Senzo Tanaka trained him as a ninja when he was a teenager. He established his own school of ninjutsu called Dux Ryan Ninjutsu and has said he won a secret martial arts tournament called the Kumite in 1975. His alleged victory at the Kumite served as the inspiration for this film. Dux's victory at the Kumite has been disputed, as has the existence of both the Kumite and Senzo Tanaka. So nobody can.
Yeah, so it wasn't even. Oh, we're not even sure if he fought in the Kumite, whether he had. I think it was like 380 something consecutive knockouts.
Yeah,
it's even if it existed in the first place. I guess that was the genius of having it set inside Kowloon Wall City. Because it was knocked down, all proof has just conveniently disappeared. Because sorry, go on.
I was just saying as well. So he served in apparently he did serve in the United States Marine Corps, the Reserve.
The Reserve, yeah.
From 1975 to 1981, and this is amazing. He claims he was sent on covert missions to Southeast Asia and awarded the Medal of Honor. He also asserts he was recruited by the CIA to work as a covert agent. His military records, however, show he was never sent overseas and has not received any awards. Dux states the military sabotaged his records to discredit him. He has been accused of falsifying his military service by authors B.G. Burkitt, Ralph Keyes, and Nigel West. So 3 guys have basically just said, this dude's full of shit.
Yeah, and that's just one bit of it. Like, it's all lies.
Yeah.
It's lies.
It's amazing because he's managed to make a career out of it. He's been a fight choreographer on, this, Lionheart, Only the Strong with Mark Dacuscus. He co-wrote The Quest with Van Damme in 96.
Yeah, and like I said, I appreciate the fact that you could get away with it. Like, he's bullshitted it, like, for years and years, and even to this day, he's just not backing down. Despite there just being no evidence. It's just like, nah, it has totally happened. It's like, fair play, double down on it.
Last thing as well, Dux states that he was introduced to and trained by ninjutsu by Senzo Tiger Tanaka, whom he described as the world-famous teacher and a descendant of 40 generations of warriors. Dux states that Tanaka brought him to Masuda, Japan when he was 16 to train him as a ninja. So just up and took this kid to Japan.
Basically, this is like the less dangerous version of Scientology. Yeah. Where, you know, usually a guy shows up, makes up a loads of stuff, turns it into a cult, becomes this like dangerous thing. There's no danger to this. He's just bullshitted his way into Hollywood, basically, into making these movies. And the thing is, it's clearly nonsense, but it has led to one of the most enjoyable 80s martial arts films. So Frank Dux, I applaud you for your absolute bullshit.
What I would love is a film based on not just the Kumite part, but the entire thing, these missions to Southeast Asia and stuff like that. But,
well, yeah, but what would you end up like? Would you play it straight, or would you end up making Tropic Thunder? Like that's the thing.
Yeah,
it totally would.
So his fight record, as you just said, is 321 wins, 1 loss, and 7 draws.
At least he was just like, listen, I'm probably pushing this a bit too far. I'll throw in a loss and a couple of draws just to make it sound a little bit more realistic. But
that was in 1980 though, but he changed his tune in 2014, and he told Axis TV that he had retired with a fight record of 329 wins and 0 losses.
That was the one I read, that he had 0 losses, and they had all these consecutive fights at this Kumite tournament, which nobody's ever heard of.
His alleged 56 consecutive knockout record was possible. Oh, sorry. Curtis Wong, an editor of Inside Kung Fu, doubted whether Dukes' alleged 56 consecutive knockout record was possible. Others observed the difficulty in proving others proving Dukes' impossibly impressive records, as the only person able to verify any of this information is Dukes himself.
Well, like I said, it's strange because we'll never get this again. We'll just never get this again because you would be able to confirm this. The world's just too connected nowadays. But back then, like Hong Kong, even like, and you can tell it with so much of this movie and what you could get away with. Just their ideas and concepts of foreigners. They're so vague. There's no research done. It's just like Hussein, for instance. They're like, well, Arabs are rapists, right? So we're going to make our Arabs all rapists. We're also going to make him Filipino. Hussein is not Arabic at all.
No.
And and a bunch of people, like even the strangest one for me though, and I'm not sure if it's because they're trying to commit to authenticity, is Chong Li himself. So there is the whole issue is why is Chong Li the bad guy, blah, blah, blah. The biggest question is, why is Chong Li Korean? It makes no sense, this movie. A big part of this movie is the fact that it's set and filmed in Hong Kong, kind of like Kickboxer the week before. It's like, so much of it was the fact that it was filmed on location and stuff. This was filmed both in Hong Kong and specifically the Kowloon Walled City, one of the few films to ever do so, which is this great kind of monument to like the history. It's like back, obviously it used to be run by the British government, Hong Kong that is. But Kowloon was this, Kowloon Walled City specifically, was this bizarre enclave which didn't belong to the British, it belonged to the Chinese. But really what it belonged to were the triads. So it was full of prostitution, like huge population after the war with loads of immigrants coming over. And it was just this massive walled, depraved city, which was eventually knocked down in 1993. But of course, it exists in this film. I actually, the first time I saw it, I seem to be bringing up this video game on every podcast, was a video game called Shenmue by Sega. And in the second game, you go to Hong Kong, and it's set in the 80s, and you go to Kowloon Walled City. And I've been to Hong Kong, and I was like, what the fuck is this walled city? It's like, have they made it up for the video game? And of course, you end up doing the research. You go, no, this place actually existed. And the fact that it exists in this film is both genius and also actually pretty good for Frank Dukes, because they're like, oh, well, it was all of the Kowloon Walled City. That's being destroyed. It doesn't exist anymore. Any proof that might have existed has disappeared. So it's absolutely fantastic.
I don't know if he thought that far ahead or if that was...
No, he 100% different. He just got lucky.
That was just a lucky coincidence for him.
it was totally a lucky coincidence. But to bring it back to my point, is like you've got this sense of authenticity, and you've got Chong Li. Chong Li is of Chinese descent. He's literally from Hong Kong. The movie is set in Hong Kong. Why don't you make him like the home favorite? Like you said, there's already issue. It's like, why is Chong Li this big deal? It's like, well, make him, everyone loves him because he's the fighter from Hong Kong. He looks like he's from Hong Kong because he is from Hong Kong. Let's make him Korean. That's so fucking 80s. And it's so silly. It's so silly.
Let's get into the whole Chong Li of it to start with, right? Because I have to ask a couple of questions. First of all, why did Donald Gibb Jackson take an instant dislike to him? Is it just because he was the previous champion? Like, and we'll get into why Jackson's in this fight as well. But why? Like, he took an instant dislike to him. Jackson won his first fight, went over to Chong Li, pointed at him and said, "I'm going to fuck you up," or whatever he said to him. Then you got Chong Li himself, which when he's fight, that dude is too big to move fast. Like that dude.
Who, Chong Li?
Yeah.
Bolo Young. I mean, Bolo Young has arguably the most impressive chest this side of like 1980s Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's an unbelievable chest.
This side of Terry Crews. Because...
Oh, dude, it's big. No, it's a different chest. It's Terry Crews has got a massive chest in that kind of bodybuilder way. Bolo Young has a chest in that Mr. Olympia, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, because he's so wide. He doesn't look like a bodybuilder. He looks like a Mr. Olympia. His chest it's unnaturally massive.
see it as well, right? When he starts getting the crowd pumped up and he's doing this and he can't move his arms and he's doing this.
Well, that's my biggest. I have a few issues, and we have to decide whether we're going to call him Chong Li his real name or Bolo. Sorry, Bolo Young his real name or Chong.
Let's stick with Chong Li. Let's stick with Chong Li.
We'll stick with Chong Li. So Chong Li, there's a lot of issues with him, but my biggest issue is the fact that he has no sense of rhythm. It is so distracting when the crowd are going, Chong Li, and he's doing it off the beat. I'm like, you are the whitest fucking Asian dude of all time, man. What the hell is going on with that? How many takes did it take to get you that close to being in rhythm? Like, come on, dude. But to bring it back to your point, it's like, why does Frank Dukes have an issue with Chong Li? It's because he has to. Because you could write the script for this movie on a fucking napkin. Like, literally, the narrative device for this entire movie is, there's a tournament.
Yeah.
That is it. That is it. There are no... This film's biggest issue is it has no stakes. And they try very hard, especially in the last 15, 20 minutes, to establish them. Because really, he has no relationship with Jackson. They don't.
No, I wrote that down. He is so upset when Jackson gets hit. You met the fucker 20 minutes ago. I have more of an issue with this than I did with Rose in Titanic, living a whole fucking life, dying and going back to Jack. Like, why? This guy I met yesterday got hurt. Oh, bless him. All right, I'll move on. Why?
Why did the Harley Davidson headband become so important? Why did it become so? And how many people grabbed that headband and squeezed it really hard and looked super intense? It happened almost as many times as Jean-Claude Van Damme did the split. It's so bizarre, but
that made me feel gross. By the way, everyone squeezing this headband. The sweat that must have come out of that thing as you squeezed it.
Jackson's a sweaty boy again, right? Just to be clear, it sounds like we're shitting on this film, and we are, because it's a ludicrous film. It's super fun. It's mega fun. All this nonsense is why it's such a cult classic. The fact that
if we got into this podcast and if we turned around and went, "Oh, it's a great film. Okay, thanks for listening. Bye." We can't. We gotta.
No. Of course, and that is. I think that's genuinely the brilliance of it. Is that it's so easy to tear this film to pieces because the acting's bad. There's no narrative. The screenplay's rubbish. But the fact of the matter is, what do we all love? Tournament movies. And this is a tournament movie distilled into its purest form because there's no discernible plot. There's just enough that, the whole Senzo Tanaka thing, his Shidoshi, it's set up so early in the film to get it out the way that if you forget that it happened, you forget about it. And then for the rest of the film, you're like, wait, why is Frank Dukes at this tournament? I don't really know. And then they try and establish all these relationships. The romantic relationship with Janice is bullshit. His friendship with Jackson is nonsense. They basically have a meet cute, a Karate Champ, the video game, and just go, "Oh, I love you now." It's the least earned "I love you" in cinematic history. I knew
you would know that video game. I was watching this video game.
Of course, I know Karate Champ. I played Karate Champ.
What the fuck is this game? Okay, Liam will tell me.
Yeah, of course. And like you said, there's no relationship between he and Bolo Young other than it's like, well, Bolo Young is the best and Bolo Young kills people. And even that's weird. That seems to be his shtick. Bolo Young, sorry, I'm calling Bolo Young, Chong Li, his shtick is he kills people in the ring, yeah? And then in the last fight or the semi-final, he kills someone and then all of a sudden everybody takes umbrage with him. It's like, as far as I can tell, this dude's been killing people in the ring for years, and now you have an issue? It's all cobblers.
He's been killing people. He's been snapping bones out of people's skin.
That is rough.
That dude he killed, right? It was quite... So he killed him in a way. Then he picked up his neck, and he gently moved his neck, and that was meant to be the finishing blow. That little...
It was a very sensual neck break.
My chiropractor has done worse to me than what he did to kill that guy, in quotes.
Yeah, well, that's another thing with this film is the violence is mega inconsistent because obviously it's called Bloodsport. There is violence in this film, but certainly growing up, it was the first time, because obviously I watched this film when I was 7, 8 years old, whoever it was. I had never seen a fracture where the bone comes to the leg.
Yeah.
And when he breaks Tong Po's leg, is it Tong Po's leg he breaks?
Yeah, that's Tong Po.
It is Tong Po, yeah. Because it's weird because I'm going to make a very strong argument as to why Tong Po is much better than Chong Li. But at the same time, Chong Li literally defeats Tong Po in this movie, which is a bit confusing. But when he breaks his leg and you can see the bone sticking through, I remember seeing that as a kid and being like, holy fuck, I have never seen that before. But I always think of that moment as being this ultra violent moment, but the rest of the film doesn't really match up to that. There's no other arm breaks. There's a little bit of blood here and there, but for the most part, it's pretty standard late 80s martial arts fare, except for this horrendous leg break.
And I loved it when some guy gets hit in the face and a bit of blood drops off him, and Jackson goes, "That's why it's called Bloodsport." Fuck off.
Oh yeah, because of the little bit of blood. But again,
the blood. When the weird Arab rapist guy, oh my god, that guy was gross anyway. But when he gets defeated and his gold tooth, which they make a point of showing all the time, gets knocked onto the floor, and that cleaner goes up and grabs it out of the pool of blood, doesn't wipe it off, puts it straight into his mouth to test if it's like this dude is taking women up to his hotel room. Like, it's not like he's been stopped once by Frank Dukes, but it's probably happened previously. And he, like, this is not the kind of guy that I'm assuming wears any sort of protection. So
it's a classy establishment, and it's just this guy who's clearly from the Philippines. The actor's name is Bernard Mariano. Yeah. And like, can you play a guy called Hussein? And we're going to put like the little headband on you and stuff, so you look like an Arab. And your basic character trait is going to be rapey. You're going to be really rapey, but you're not going to do it sneaky. You're going to go up to a girl in a really high class bar, grab her, and say, "We are going upstairs to my room." It's like, oh, fucking shit. It's like, no, I mean, it's so 80s. It's amazing.
When that janitor then takes that bloody tooth, puts it in his mouth to test if it's real gold, he has got every disease that guy has seen.
Oh, dude, immediate hepatitis C. Like, immediately. It's ridiculous.
Hussein was so weird because you said, well, he's played by Bernard Mariano.
Yeah.
When you see him in a hotel room with the headgear and stuff, not the hotel room, the hotel with the headgear and stuff. Then when you see him go up against Van Damme, for a split second, I didn't realize it was the same guy. Not until he showed his gold tooth and said, because he doesn't look like...
Because, you just go, oh, well, you know, because they add that little kind of headwear accoutrement, if you want to call it. You're like, oh, well, he's from the Middle East. And then, of course, you take that off, and it becomes so abundant. If it wasn't already clear that he's clearly Asian, you're like, wait, is that the same dude? It's like, yes, that is the same fucking guy. And I know there's the whole issue about like Tong Po in Kickboxer, the fact that they obviously put prosthetics on, but at least they made a bit of effort there. I mean, I'm sure people from Thailand, like, dude does not look Thai at all. But yeah, with in this film in particular, I appreciate he's a lesser character in this film. But guys, you couldn't have made just a tiny bit of effort there, just a tiny bit. But that's not what this film's about. That's what it's just keen to get to the tournament at the cost of all else. And I just can't imagine that. Like, this is basically, because the obvious comparison say, oh, well, this is Mortal Kombat, the movie. But what it really is UFC, the early years. Yeah. There's no way the people at UFC haven't looked at this. Like, somebody, you know, the kind of, God, who was it who actually...
Oh, dude, it's in trivia, mind. It's in fact. It's the fact that this inspired UFC. It's in.
They had to. Like, I think it was Art Davey and Rory and Gracie were the founders of the UFC. There's no way they didn't look at this and go, oh, wait, so there's no weight classes. There's all different styles and they can fight each other. Of course, that's been lost now. If you watch the UFC, everybody has, like, of course, you have some people are grapplers, some people are strikers, but there's like this, it is called mixed martial arts. But originally, if you go, you know, when I started watching UFC and it was UFC 1, 2 and stuff like that, it really was this, where there were no weight classes. There were basically zero rules. And it was just like, well, you're a kickboxer and you're a wrestler. And you just, you know, they didn't have that kind of crossover in abilities. They were just like, can my style beat your style? Where like the styles now in UFC have become very homogenous, obviously. Yeah. But back then it was really interesting because, like you said, there were no rules. And the most interesting ones, like you've got in this film, were the zero weight class ones. Like, I remember one of the best fights I ever saw was like this giant dude. He must have been like 22 stone fighting this guy. He couldn't have weighed more than, I don't know, 11 stone soaking wet. And they're in the same ring fighting each other. And the tiny guy eventually beat the big guy. Like, I can't believe that fucking happened. But that was like that's just Bloodsport.
That was like the monkey dude fighting the
E Honda guy.
Yeah.
He totally, again, I don't know where E Honda, and it's only because I don't know the character's name, or like, I don't know where he was from. No. But I love the fact that they basically just gone for like archetypes. They're just like, oh, well, he's the big guy, he's a small guy. Like, the representation of guys from the Middle East, questionable. The guys from Africa, super questionable.
Yeah.
But then even like the lazy stuff, like I said, with Chong Li being Korean, it just felt utterly pointless. But I'm convinced it was down to this ill-conceived concept of authenticity, which of course this movie has zero authenticity because it's all bollocks.
You said it a couple of times already about how they just went at a brisk pace just to get to the Kumite.
Yeah.
No brisker than how they implanted the men. Why Frank wanted to fight in the Kumite in the first place. Like, he saves the Tanaka's boy, and the fact that Tanaka's boy has the weirdest insult in the world. All right, round eye, let's keep going.
I liked a bit of like reverse racism. It's nice, like the white guy gets it for a little bit. But if ever you wanted proof that this movie, like, we talked, because a couple of weeks ago we did kickboxing. Growing up, that was one of the big questions. What's better, Bloodsport or Kickboxer? Make no mistake. Going back and rewatching them, I was right when I was a kid. Kickboxer is a much, much better movie. I will make the caveat that this movie might actually be more fun. Because it's so ludicrous. Yeah. But and the idea that these aren't essentially the same films, I still don't get that, dude. Like, it's basically, they made this film, somebody's looked at it and gone, do you know what, that was really fun. Do you know what we should do? We should just basically remake it, but slightly better. We should just have a bit more plot, a bit more action. Like, Kickboxer is ostensibly the same movie with a better script, better acting, maybe not better action, I'll give you that, a better soundtrack by the same fucking people. But like I said, because the emphasis is so on the tournament, it's hard just not to love a tournament film. Like, when you watch a Rocky film, of course, the best Rocky films, they have stakes, they have character development. But what do you remember? You remember the fight at the end. This film's like, oh, we're just gonna have fights. We're just gonna have fights, and you're like, this is silly, but also kind of fucking awesome, dude. Kind of fucking awesome.
How did that whole diatribe you just said have any of the point that I just made?
Dude, as I finished what I said then, I was like, I can't remember what he said. I can't remember what he said.
Well, you totally went off on a tangent about...
Oh, Senzo Tanaka, about him being a kid. Well, that's only because
what I want to say is about the kid. How they actually just implanted the Kumite thing into his mind. The fact that Frank rescues Tanaka's kid... And then he wakes up and has this weird conversation about, oh, when I grow up, I want to fight in the Kumite. Like, where did that come from? Why Kumite? Like,
no, he didn't just wake up. He said in a terrible accent, when I grow up, I'm going to be in Kumite. He's the worst child actor I've ever fucking seen.
Tanaka.
No, I know. Sorry.
I know you're about Frank's kid. I love the fact I was going on about that, and you just went, no, I want to talk about Kickboxer versus this. So fuck what Rob said. I'm going to talk about Kickboxer versus...
Oh, yeah, if I've got something in my head, you can go fuck yourself. I'm getting to the point. And when I say the point, I mean my point. So apologies. But no, I know what you mean. Like, the little kid, he's very much got it stuck in his head. But, like, they kind of wash over it a lot. But there are references to the fact that, obviously, the Tanaka clan have been doing this for generations. And that's their whole kind of thing. It's like, oh, well, my father fought in the Kumite, his father fought in the Kumite. So obviously from a young age, he's telling his kid, because he's quite serious, Senzo Tanaka, is that his name?
Senzo Tanaka, yeah.
Yeah. He's obviously quite serious about all this. So he's got his kids, it's like, this is what you're going to do. I'm going to teach you to fight, and you're going to fight, and you're going to be the Kumite champion kind of thing. It's all pretty ludicrous. And again, it's just to kind of have that connection to the tournament. And ostensibly, it's just an excuse to give Frank Dukes an excuse to go to the tournament. Just a narrative purpose for him being there. And it's a light one, to say the least.
But let's look at the kid who played young Frank Dukes, Pierre Raffini, who never did another film again.
Well, that's like, again, to bring it back to the whole Kickboxer Bloodsport thing, it's like, if you wanted proof of which film is technically the better made, you need to look no further than the training sequences. The whole setup is horrible. He's a terrible actor. Like, even the bit with him and Tanaka's son, who clearly neither of us know his name, and he has a fight with the kids, like, one day I'm going to fight in the Kumite, and then they shake hands. Like, who are these fucking kids? Like, yes, I agree, shake hands, this is what will happen. And it's just like, oh my God. And of course, all this is coming in such a clumsy narrative device. When Frank Dukes comes to the house to see Senzo Tanaka, because obviously he's dying or whatever, he looks at the sword. How long is he looking at that sword? They even have like the wavy thing on screen, like, oh, this is him remembering. And he just stands there and looks at it and remembers everything that happened between them. It's a terrible narrative device.
Tanaka's son was named Shingo, by the way. How we forgot the name Shingo.
Sorry, Shingo. But yeah, and he keeps using the term Shidoshi. I don't think I've heard that in another film. Senzo Tanaka being his Shidoshi.
Yeah.
I'm sure it is a real term, don't get me wrong.
Oh, this had to come from Frank Dukes himself, like the proper Frank Dukes. Martial science.
Dude, how many times do you say martial science? I've never heard that before.
No.
It's kind of like, remember when we did the Back to the Future 2 podcast, and it suddenly dawned on us that almanac has never been used in a sentence outside of reference to Back to the Future 2. Again, I'm sure it's a real word. Nobody uses it. Martial science, I think they might have actually made it up for this film.
Yeah, they're two real words put together for nothing. And the fact he had to explain, what's martial science? Well, you come over to do grapes, and you have to have science for grapes. I come over to do this. And, like, what are you fucking talking about?
I'm glad we're picking out issues with this part of the film in particular, because you're getting an issue with martial science, which I did notice, but I was still struggling getting over young Frank Dukes' combination of a San Francisco Giants baseball cap and a New York Giants football jersey. I was like, wait, what the fuck? Is that his thing? Like, he doesn't support a city. He just supports the Giants. Like, it doesn't matter if it's the Busan Giants in South Korea, the New York Giants of New York, or the San Francisco Giants of San Francisco. It's just like, I just like Giants. That's it. It's a horrendous oversight.
Think they were trying, I'm looking a bit deeper into it, because he's just come over from because the kid said, look, if you want to hang around with us, you've got to do this petty larceny. So I'm assuming
the least convincing white criminals I've ever seen, by the way.
So I think he's trying to just fit in. So he got anything that was Americanized.
He's like, oh, the Giants, these are the same. Like, he doesn't realize that they don't belong to the same team. So yeah, you're giving him the benefit of the doubt. I love the idea that it's actually an active decision. Like, no, he's come over. He doesn't get it. He's trying to fit in. He's made the mistake. He thinks, oh, well, it's the Giants. It must be the same team. They're from different parts of the country, and that's what we're going for. I don't think it's that at all. I think the costume department gone, the Giants, that'll do. Throw it all on him. There's no way they've given it any thought. I love your optimism, though.
Thank you. The audio department must have had a field day with this film, because the dubbing for the dubbing for young Frank, for a start, because
I can't believe that's dubbed, because it's so bad. Like, how bad could he be that he would need to be dubbed by someone that bad?
Yeah, that bad. And obviously Bolo Young's dubbing.
Oh, yeah, that's really bad.
Yeah, very bad.
And he only has, 6 lines? And it sounds quite American.
To get me to say at the beginning, bricks don't hit back or whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll get to that in a minute. Like, that's just another example in this film of just something happening. Like, it doesn't need to happen. It's like when Frank Duke shows up at the tournament and the guys are like, oh, you're with the Shinzo Tanaka clan. You don't look like it. You have to prove yourself. It's like, wait, why does he have to prove? Like, Jackson is a slob from America. He's just shown up. They're like, yeah, come on in. But this dude, who's clearly shredded, know what he's doing. It's like, oh, no, you have to prove yourself by doing this test of might. So it's basically just a bonus stage that they're throwing into the film. Again, narratively makes no sense. But we're going to put it in there anyway. So, yeah.
What martial science did Jackson know, by the way?
Well, he didn't know. He just clubbed people. I mean, the first guy he hit was the most ludicrous punch I've ever seen. It was like a hammer fist to the forehead. It was. I think it would be kind to say it was an unorthodox approach.
Yeah.
But saying that, Jackson, I'm like, if Jackson hadn't gone all Hulk Hogan, could he have beat Chong Li in the semi-final? He had him down, and just out of nowhere, it's like, I won. I killed him. It's like, wait, why do you think he's dead? I mean, that's a wild kind of assumption. But like, he knocks him down. He seems to have him where he wants him, and then he wanders off and goes all cheering to the crowd. I was like, if he wasn't such a fucking drunk and stayed on the game, he might have beat Chong Li. And what a surprise that would have been. If all the build-up for the film, you're like, well, Frank Dukes is going to fight Chong Li in the end, and then he has to fight Jackson and then gets beat by Jackson in the end, and you're like, wait a minute, is Jackson the hero of this film? What the fuck? And he ends up getting with Janice. Sorry, Janice. Jesus
I
Christ,
felt uncomfortable every time they did a close-up of Jackson's face, because does that dude, and I'm not trying to be mean, but did that dude have something wrong with his eyes?
I didn't notice. If he did, it was just part of the whole character. I actually really like Jackson in this film. I think he's super fun.
Like Jackson was a fun, like he was the comic relief to put into this film. But every time it just stayed, like the one eye just seemed to be like a glass eye, like just wander off on its own kind of.
If it is, I didn't notice, but I kind of hope if I go back, there's just one eye look. I never noticed. It's the same thing with like Victor Lin's character. Does he needed to be is he required in this film? I don't think so. But is he awesome? Kind of. Like, I just love that random line where he tells Jackson that he looks like a Jackson. It's the most like needless line in the whole film, but it's fun for sure. But I just sorry. I was just because you were saying that Jackson's eye made you uncomfortable. If we bring it back briefly to the training sequence, what made me uncomfortable is the split sequence. So, of course, you've got to have the training split sequence in a Jean-Claude Van Damme film. That's a given. So he puts him in a device, again, basically the same device that we had in Kickboxer the year later. And he pulls the string and he makes him do the split. But in this, they really do play it like a horror movie at the start. But then all of a sudden, it kind of turns erotic. It's like, I'm just of the mindset that you should never make that kind of intense eye contact with another dude when you're doing the splits. Like, all of a sudden, the music changes, and he's just looking at Tanaka, just eyeballing him when he's in this, like, sexual splits device. Like, well, that became weird very quickly.
Yeah.
But again, just further proof that the training sequence in this film is miles off. Like, the overshadowing with the whole, oh, you're going to have to fight blind at some point. It's so clumsy. It's like, oh, does he train him for every eventuality? Or does he just train him for that and go like, man, I hope he has to fly blind one day. Otherwise, this is all going to be pretty fucking pointless.
Yeah, Frank Dukes is on his deathbed going, fucking hell, I learned how to fight blind and I never got to use it.
Never got to use it. But luckily, this guy goes full Mr. Nobody notices the fact that Chong Li goes full Mr. Fuji and throws the fucking powder in his eyes. And everyone's like, I wonder what happened. It's like, he clearly threw fucking powder in his eyes. What the fuck?
I want this, that final fight where he throws the powder. I love as well. They made a big deal of prepare stage for final fight. And you think, oh, flames. Oh,
yeah.
Oh, something like that. I don't know, maybe some sharp bamboo sticks or something. No. We're just going to raise both ends up a little bit.
Yeah, again, further proof that they just took this movie and remade it into a better film with Kickboxer, because you get to that final fight, you've got established stakes and narrative connection with Tong Po. Tong Po, okay, he doesn't show up for the last fight, we'll give you that, but he's clearly terrifying. There's a reason for him to be there. It's like they set up for that final fight, all of a sudden, like you said, there are fucking flames. They do the glass and the gloves, and you're like, oh, this is a final fight. This is like a proper final stage in a video game. In this, they just make it a clumsy tilt. I'm like, wait, what the fuck is the point of this? And there is that moment, exactly what you said, when I was like, why does he want to fight Chong Li so much? It's just like, there's no real reason. There's nothing between them. There is as much between, you made the point, and I never thought of it until you mentioned it. There's arguably more beef between Jackson and Chong Li than there is between Frank and Chong Li in this film. Between
Frank and Chong Li, but Chong Li is a bit pissed off because Frank beat his record about the fastest knockout.
That's it. Yeah, he's just a brat. That's it, with a giant chest.
And this secretive kumite that apparently anyone can find. Like, Janice is asking everybody if they can tell her about the kumite. Oh, you're here for the kumite. You're a fighter. You're here for... No, we're not. Okay. All right, maybe I'll go upstairs and get a bit assaulted just so I know about the kumite. Okay, no, this guy's... help me. That's fine. Can you get me? No. Okay, but I'll sleep with you anyway. And then all of a sudden, she finds some weird gambling dude.
Yeah.
And there's the question as well, by the way. This is such an ancient art. Mm-hmm. You know, it's all about the competition. But these people are letting people come in to gamble against it.
Yeah, it's again very strange. And to your point, the idea that is it a secret tournament or does everyone know about it? Because clearly the American army know about kumite. They are clearly up to the fucking scratch on this because, and again, that whole subplot about, like, is this like an offshoot of Universal Soldier? Like, they make this big thing like, well, Frank Dukes can't go to the kumite because we put so much money and effort into creating this super soldier. And I'm like, is this a real thing? Like, the whole section with Forrest Whitaker and Norman Burton, like you said, the most inept police officers or whatever they are, kind of...
CID, I think they're called.
CID, thank you. Yeah. That whole sequence is like from another movie. It's from a completely different movie. And you feel like, oh, maybe they could have like stretched that out and made, again, if they'd established any of the narrative around that, it would have made more sense. But instead, they just kind of pop in and out of the movie And it really feels like it belongs in a completely different place to the rest of this film. But I don't get why Frank Dukes is so important to the army and why he can't. And they make so much effort and put Frank Dukes in so much danger. Like, dude, just let him fight in the fucking tournament. He said, like, listen, I'm going to fight in this tournament. I'm going to be back tomorrow. And, you know, from what we've seen, most people, unless you're fighting Chong Li, you know, you might get a bang on the head or something like that, but you'll be all right. You'll come back home. Jesus Christ, just chill out, guys.
Forrest Whitaker hates his job as well, by the way.
So much hates Norman Burton as well.
He hates his job. Like, everything is just, oh no, I just want to get this done and get it over with. The only time I see that dude smile is when they're putting food in front of him.
And rightly so. At least he's not complaining about the local food. Again, Norman Burton going full on kind of American in the 80s, like, oh, Jesus Christ, what is this fucking muck? But it is like those sequences, the best thing about them is that they get to show off like Hong Kong again. Like Hong Kong in the 80s, just fucking cool. It's just a cool place. So it's like you have that, one of the most, again, bizarre chase sequences. You think, oh, we know they've come all the way across the country. They're going to chase down Frank Dukes and try and capture him. And instead, it's something out of a Disney musical where he's like hanging off cars. Like you feel like, you know, if you really kind of leaned into the music, that could be a completely comedic sequence in this film. And it is still played for laughs. But there's, again, no threat. And that is one of the biggest issues of this film. Right up until the end, there's no threat. There's no stake. Things are just happening. We're just watching a tournament, which is silly, but it's also fine because it's fun to watch a tournament. Because, again, and a big part of that is having those establishing shots with all the different fighters. Yeah. The fact that they're not just generic fighters, every single one straight away. You only need like 2 seconds of screen time in one of the movie's 5 montages where you're like, oh, look, there's this fighter, there's this fighter. And even without the narrative to back it up, you're looking at the guys like, oh, that guy's going to be the guy in the semi-final. Like the kickboxing dude. You're like, oh, he's going to be there at the end. He's going to be like the guy who's tough to beat at the end, you know? So, yeah, it works in its own unique way, I suppose.
The CID guys, right? Is 50,000 volts an actual taser voltage? It is, isn't it?
I don't know. Are they actual tasers? They're fucking ginormous.
They were massive.
They're so big.
Well, so if they are 50,000 volts and that is normal, that's to take somebody down, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
But they were both ready to shoot him. So can he survive 100,000 volts?
Again, the whole thing that they're putting him under so much danger. It's like at the end sequence when they have all the cops like ready to ambush him. Yeah. It's like surely they could do a better job than wait in the corridor in Kowloon World City to jump out on him while they're waiting at the end like mini bosses with their tasers. It's like, guys, you are so goddamn inept. It's so bad.
It is, and they get to the end. We've been chasing you for days. All right, we're going to stop and watch.
Yeah. Well, and they quite enjoy it. And it's the same with Janice. Like the whole Janice story, I don't know if she's playing him or he's playing her, but there's no chemistry between the two of them. They basically have a sexual relationship briefly so they can show off. Jean-Claude Van Damme's admittedly wonderful bottom. That seems to be their thing. Oh my God,
that dude loves showing off his ass in the 80s and the 90s.
Oh, why wouldn't he? It's a fantastic butt. And that was one of the, it was one of the reasons this movie got made with Jean-Claude Van Damme. They wanted to make a film that appealed to both women and men. So it's like dudes love Jean-Claude Van Damme because he's a badass. Women love him because he was fucking smoking hot and he has the butt and everything and does the splits. But the whole thing with Janice is a complete nonsense. And she goes full on Adrian in Rocky IV, where she tries to ruin everything for him at the end. She knows about this tournament. She's a reporter. And then all of a sudden she gets squirmish because somebody gets killed. It's like, you knew this was happening in this tournament. Don't try and pretend you're suddenly in love with Frank Dukes. We're just not buying it. And yeah, she's the one who calls the cops on him. She tries to ruin everything. And all of a sudden, you can't win. You know, she has to be. But then 2 minutes later, like you said, with the cops, they're all trying to stop him 1 second. 3 minutes later, they're having the fight in the tournament and they're all cheering him on and seemingly just enjoying themselves.
It's the oddest mix in the world, honestly.
It really is.
But again, it's fun to watch. I still don't know if I'm in your camp of which is the better film, because as I said, when I grew up, I watched Kickboxer a lot. After I watched Kickboxer this time, I still had fond memories of Bloodsport, so I would have put Bloodsport ahead of it because I hadn't watched Bloodsport in a while. But now I've watched Bloodsport and Kickboxer. They're both ridiculous. I'm not sure which one tops the other one.
This is, well, right, make no mistake, this film's more ludicrous than Kickboxer. 100, even with the dance sequence and all the other nonsense you get in Kickboxer. Kickboxer is more of a movie. As I said, it's better directed. Even the score and the soundtrack are by the same person. They're better in Kickboxer. I still think the action's better. Like I said, the training sequence, the support characters, they're all better. But this film is still so fun. Like it's like I said, it comes down to the fact that it basically abandons everything else in favor of like, let's just get more tournaments. Like, well, we could just make this film a little bit longer. Like, no, this film is not going to be longer than 93 minutes. That is absolutely out of the question. So I think objectively, Kickboxer is a better movie than this. Objectively,
yeah.
Tong Po is better. But if you tell me that you think Bloodsport is more fun than Kickboxer and you prefer to watch it, I totally understand. I mean,
what you mentioned the soundtrack, and I know we'll get into soundtrack, but I do love the fact this brings back our boy Stan Bush. Like, did that do anything other than 80s films?
And like I said in the previous podcast, the fact that so many of these songs are completely interchangeable, except for maybe Kumite, like in the song. That's fucking awesome. But you have the fantastic, like I said, there are 5 montages in this film. One of them, and it never quite reaches the levels of Rocky IV, either in terms of like the songs aren't as good, and it oddly doesn't feel as prevalent. When I looked it up, and I realized that there were 5 montages, it didn't feel like there were 5 montages in this film. Like when you watch Rocky IV, you're like, wait, was that entire film fucking montages? It's ridiculous. This, it doesn't feel quite as in your face. But they do a great sequence of introducing all the characters with the Stan Bush song. But then you have like the "You're Still the Night," the song doesn't make any sense in the moments. Their equivalent of like Rocky in the Lamborghini having his thoughtful moment comes right at the end of the film, but he's on a bus. It's just not as fucking cool, and the songs aren't as good. But again, it is fun. It's undoubtedly fun. And
I might have to just make a playlist of Stan Bush 1980s films.
Like, dude, it's all the films. It's all the films. And again, like, to come back to that connection between Bloodsport and Kickboxer, it's the same guys. It's the same guy doing the score, the same guy doing the soundtrack, and they're just like, yeah, bring them back. We'll do it again.
Because it was 88 and 89, wasn't it? So basically, they could have just filmed these back to back.
They totally could have. Especially going back and rewatching them. It's amazing how similar they are. It's really unbelievable. But as I say, like going back, I was almost surprised by how bad some of the acting, some of the writing is in this film.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was like, oh yeah, there's so many. It's not like I went back and I was like, oh, this is terrible. I was aware of that when I was younger. I always thought Kickboxing was the better movie. But of course, I go back and rewatch it. I'm like, this film is still so much fun. I don't want those 90 minutes back. I'm glad I spent them rewatching Bloodsport.
What I do like that they did for Kickboxer is asked Van Damme to tone down his Van Damme-ness when he's doing his.
There's still quite a lot of that in this film, isn't there? Where especially,
but then when he did Kickboxer in '89, they asked him to tone it down till the end. Because there's a lot of that in this one.
Well, that is the thing. You get it in both films. Like, you get those Van Damme-isms to a certain extent, but you don't see them for most of the film. He tends to save them for the boss fight at the end. Yeah. Then all of a sudden, when they're doing the slow motion, he hits them. He's like, and like they do the face and like the wide eyes and stuff like that. It's all, because obviously they've already done the split 7. I think he did the split 7 times in this film, is the official number.
Loves the splits.
It felt like more. Again, it's the complete opposite of the montage. When I saw that they have 5 montages in this film, I was like, oh, I felt like there was like 2 or 3. When I read that he does the split 7 times in this film, I was like, dude, it felt like he did it 82 times. It felt like he was mostly in the splits, which is kind of cool. I mean, he can do the splits really well.
This film gave us the splits punch as well, didn't it?
Yeah, which they saw for Johnny Cage in Mortal Kombat, where he does the splits and punches the guy in the dick. But yeah, the end fight does have the whole Van Damme making the noises, everything slow motion. But what it really has is maybe the greatest overacting of all time. Like when he gets the Mr. Fuji style dust to the eyes, and he's blind. And let's be clear, he's not blind. He's got blurry vision. He acts his fucking. It's like he's being crucified. He turns that shit up to 11. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. And Bolo Young, I'm calling him Bolo Young because of Chong.
Yeah, that's okay. We've gone back and forth those times.
Chong Li is getting his ass kicked. He's getting fucked up. So he decides to, like you say, do the Mr. Fuji mist in the eyes. And then he's like, all right, now, instead of just jumping on Van Damme and ending this movie quickly, because the dude has blurry vision, punch to the face, get him to the floor, just do that sensual neck break.
Yeah, neck break, yeah.
But But no, he decides to just punch him a couple of times, start doing his out of rhythm arm pumping.
Loves that. Loves it.
And then even the crowd was out of rhythm because some of them were shouting Chong Li. Some of them, I don't know what they were shouting. I think it was Dukes, maybe.
Maybe.
What was going on. And yeah, and he's just like, dude, just finish the fight. That's what I hated about films like that. I know you drag it out, and I know the hero's always going to win. But I'm thinking, if you've gone that length to cheat, stop fucking. And I do this when I watch wrestling. I watch wrestling. When the heel gets the bad guy down, instead of finishing him up, he then starts pandering to the crowd. I'm just fucking finish him. You'll get the game.
That's the great thing about this, though, is the pantomime of it, which allows your hero to have his silly, ridiculous kind of like Christ on the cross moment as he's got, his vision is slightly blurred. Nowadays, you feel like, well, if you're in a movie, he would have to leap upon because everyone's watching the UFC. It's like you've got to finish the fight, but instead here, it's almost more like a comic book. It's more like anime or something, where you have these like ongoing narratives, and a fight which should take 2 minutes ends up taking entire episodes, as everybody has their inner monologues and their inner narratives and stuff, and like you say, pandering to the crowd. Nowadays, I feel like people would be too cynical about all this, and that's why these are these like unique time capsules of movies. We will literally never get movies like these again because we can't. Because everyone's, like I said, they tried it with the Expendables, and it was too winky, too noddy. They lost the magic of, no, we're not going, like, even now, if you try to do this and you didn't make it winky and noddy, you're still trying to recreate this moment, knowing yourself what you're doing. Back then, they were like, no, this is how you make a movie. This is how you make an action movie. There was no sense of like, oh, like this is what we're trying, like this is the best we can do. This is how we want to make action movies. And that is gone forever, sadly. So we're going to have to go back and rewatch Bloodsport and Kickboxer in perpetuity. Apparently. I'm
not letting you get away with that, by the way. Did you combine Blurred and Vision to make Blizzard?
Not intentionally. But if anybody wants to, if that works, I'll trademark that, So. Oh
my God, they threw mist in his eye and he had some blizzard.
It's like, wait, is that a word? Did you just make up a word? Jesus Christ! like that's my equivalent of martial science. just making shit up. But like I said, it is a truly ludicrous final fight.
Yeah,
but it's super fun. And like even in the end, when he makes him say, "Is it mate?" which is basically "I submit."
Yeah.
They try and
Matai,
sorry. They try and make a big deal out of that. Like when they go to the hospital to see Jackson, and Janice is there, and she's like, "Oh, but he made him say Matai." Like all the way through the film, they've been establishing that this is a big deal. Who gives a fuck? Are we supposed to care about that? And then 2 minutes later, he tells Jackson he loves him. Why do you love this guy? I don't get it.
Anytime I've got you, my brother. Like, dude, you met this guy 24 hours ago.
Yeah, I even think Jackson was kind of weird about it because, like, I love you, and he's like, cool. Like, all right, dude, chill out. I was like, I've got your back and all, but love's a bit intense. This is the 80s. We don't do that. I
need a couple more beers before we do this.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you imagine him at the bar with his mates. It's like, well, the tournament was cool, and this guy told you he loved you. Oh, I know he's from America, but he's from Belgium. You know what Europeans get like. It's like, Jesus Christ, it's a bit intense, truth be told.
You've traveled more than me, but I don't know if you've actually ever gone to a hospital in Asia.
My brother has.
Because he lives there. Kickboxer and Bloodsport. I forgot the film we were doing then for a minute. Those hospital rooms are the whitest I've ever seen. Like, they are just, they're fucking gleaming. Are they that white? Like, to the fact that they blind you?
I guess it depends on where you go, but I think back then in particular, like, they go out their way to kind of put white people in pretty decent hospitals. Because I know my brother lives over in Asia now, but the first time he ended up in hospital, he was actually over there on holiday, and he ended up having to have his appendix taken out. And they said they went out of their way to put him in like a really good hospital room because he was a white person. It was ridiculous. So maybe there's something to that. I don't know. Or maybe it's just because, I don't know, it's a fucking movie. And they're like, they don't. It would be weird if they had that whole sequence and there was like two guys around the corner all like coughing and spluttering because they were sharing a room with Jackson. So we'll give them the benefit and just say it was for movie purposes.
There was that joke, wasn't it? The Queen thinks the entire world outside the palace smells like fresh paint.
Yeah, totally.
Anywhere she went, it just smelled like fresh paint.
That's all they can smell. But yeah, like the whole denouement for this film is quite bizarre. Like, again, I mentioned the fact that there's no real relationship between Janice and Frank Dux. It just feels forced. And then at the end, Frank just gets back on a plane in a very 80s moment. She just pulls up onto the runway. I don't know where she's going, but they just have that little bow and he basically just fucks off. Like, so usually you at least have that moment, like they might spend some more time together or they stay in Hong Kong. It's like, no, I'm leaving now. And she's like, cool, I'm going to see you off on the runway.
You think
like she even gets her own bus there? It's like, is she just going to another flight?
Being sat on the plane or whatever. But no, they let her in through the secure airport.
I mean, it was the 80s. And I do think people forget just how lax comparatively it was at airports back in the day. Like, you really could go right up to the gate, even if you didn't have a ticket kind of thing. You know, you didn't have to go through all the security. It just wasn't the same, especially in certain countries. But
because
the idea of her being on a bus and going legitimately right up to the plane in what I assume is Hong Kong airport, which is a massive fucking airport, I might add. I'm just not sure. Even in 1988, I don't think that's fucking happening.
In the 90s, my old man used to take us to Cardiff Airport to actually sit in the lounge to watch the planes go. Yeah.
Well, that just used to happen. Obviously, it all changed in 2001, but before then, it was so much more like it wasn't just people just rocked up and just walked onto a plane, but you could get a lot deeper into an airport before you had to go through security and all that nonsense. Things changed. That was for damn sure. But I like the fact that this movie ended on as ludicrous a note as the rest of the film. And I think my favorite bit was he does his little bow, and then they just have Frank Dukes' obviously contractual like diatribe at the end of the film where it's like, oh, he was in 300 fights, he won them all, he did this, I did that, I was here, and it's just all nonsense. But it was like, you feel like maybe he should have put the brakes on, but he just kept getting away with it. So they just kept saying, what else then? I was in the CIA, and like, oh, this sounds like good. So he just keeps making up more stuff. There's like 12 separate sections at the end when you have that freeze frame on Jean-Claude Van Damme. And it's all about the quote unquote real Frank Dukes' achievements in life. But yeah, absolute nonsense. But I'm all for
it. Right. Should we move on to favorite scenes?
Yes, let's do that. Favorite scenes. I mean, I could say Frank Dukes doing the splits. That could be one of 16 scenes, of course, although especially like there are actually just 7 of them. If I was going to pick a favorite split sequence, I think it's a bit of an oversight from myself, is he does one, and I assume it's up on the peak in Hong Kong, looking over the city. I'm like, because I went to the peak in Hong Kong, I really should have tried to do the split and done my equivalent. It would have been far less impressive, but I'm going to go with that. I just like the sequences in Hong Kong. I like the fact that they shot in Kowloon Wall City, and that as silly as the chase sequence is, the fact that it's actually in Hong Kong, I think it adds something to the film. So I'm going to go for the non-fight sequences and say either Jean-Claude doing the splits or him getting chased by Forrest Whitaker.
Well, to be fair, I'm not going for a fight sequence either.
Oh, fair enough.
I'm going for okay, USA.
I mean, it's connected. It's when they go into the walled city in Kowloon, but okay, USA. I mean, at least Jackson's aware that line was really fucking dumb. He was like, what the fuck is going on here?
I don't know why, but that made me laugh. To be fair.
Well, it just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's like, why is that line in the film? Because God knows.
They're having little whisper talking. You've got this dude just eyeing him up, and this dude looks like a beast anyway. And he's
a big old unit,
guys. And he just looks around. And he gets this slight little smile. And he goes, "Okay, USA."
I'm not sure if they just kind of established that whole idea that the Kowloon Walled City is full of, like, dare I say, mutants, because he's obviously got something going on there. He looks like a weird cat. And then that last sequence, one of the last sequences, when Jean-Claude Van Damme is walking towards the final fight with Chong Li, and all the guards show up. Before the guards show up, he's walking, and there's just this like little gremlin dude who just laughs at him. He's just standing by a door. And it's just like, that's it? You're just going to laugh at it? Like, it's very, very strange.
Yeah. But that was my favorite scene.
Yeah. Well, I think it's both to do with just establishing a sense of place. In terms of loves, it's very similar to Kickbox. Like JCVD, he essentially makes the film. It is a star-making turn for him. I don't think this film works if you get like, what was the guy who did American Ninja? He was actually up for this film. Remember the film?
Michael Dudikoff.
Yeah, he was up for this film. I don't think this film's nearly as good as, say, Michael Dudikoff. Like, there's a reason this film works, and a big part of that is Jean-Claude Van Damme.
I would love to talk about. We might have to do American Ninja now, so I can just keep going. Michael Dudikoff.
Yeah, the thing is, I remember watching American Ninja when I was younger. I remember nothing about it. Nothing. I mean, I couldn't remember the fucking dude's name then. But Bloodsport has lived a lot longer in the memory than American. I suspect those films are going to be really bad, but who knows? Maybe we'll go back and do them. But yeah, sorry, JCVD is my number one. Number two is Bolo Young. He's, I think if he wasn't so scary to look at and had such a kind of impact, like this film again wouldn't work because there is no connection between the characters. So basically they tell you he's the bad guy by just looking the part. In the same way, like Darth Vader at the start of A New Hope. Nobody tells you he's the bad guy. He just shows up, and as soon as you see him, you're like, he's the fucking bad guy. You don't have to be told Bolo Young or Chong Li is the bad guy. He just looks like the bad. He looks like the boss fight, doesn't he? He just looks the part. So I think he's a big part of it. And the fact that the narrative to this film is there's a tournament. And the tournament is awesome. That's why this film works. All the narrative stuff is just like, well, we need to make it at least 90 minutes. Otherwise, it's not really a movie. But all they're interested in, we've not even mentioned the director, Newt Arnold. All he's interested in is just like, listen, let's just get them to the tournament. That's it. And although, if you're aware of Newt Arnold as a director, he only directed 2 other movies. They're super schlocky. It was 1962 Hands of a Stranger, which is dodgy as it sounds, and 1971's Bloodthirst. And you think, oh, well, this guy, he makes schlocky movies, he makes Bloodsport, it all kind of makes sense. You look at his career as a second unit director, he worked on Godfather Part 2, The Goonies, War Games, Blade Runner. He's done all these amazing movies. He's like one of those those managers who's like a number 2, but never really, he could never step up to the hot seat and become a manager. He's one of those guys. But he only directed 3 films, one of them being Bloodsport. But
we had a guy like that previously, didn't we? I can't remember the film now, but there was a guy who was a director for Brett Ratner. He was like the second
Brett
Ratner, and then he got to do a film we covered, and I can't remember the film.
What the fuck? Because Brett Ratner was involved in it as well, wasn't he? Because they're buddies. All right, we got to jump off that because I'm not going to remember it. But Sorry, to long points made short. The tournament. I love the tournament.
When you first introduced the loves and hates section, you said, "We'll do loves and hates. We'll literally just give it 1 or 2 words, and then we'll move on." And if we go back to when we first did that, you failed on the first attempt.
Oh, 100%. Me trying to tell myself, I'm just going to say 1 or 2 words. It's not really my thing, is it? Let's be honest. Oh, well, you make up for it now. Just say 3 words. Your loves.
Why have I got to do it? You're the one who's gone on and on and on.
Hey, you're the one complaining about it. What the fuck, dude?
To be fair, I'm going to mix a love and a hate.
Okay.
Bolo Young's in both.
See, this is your kind of bullshit. This is your equivalent of 3.5 stars.
Bolo Young's in both because Bolo Young.
I get that.
The love, because the dude looks like a beast. Definitely, you look at him straight away, like you say, and he's the bad guy. Mm-hmm. For me as well, it was more the fact that I first watched Double Impact before I watched this.
Yeah,
seeing him in Double Impact where he took out Van Damme's parents and stuff. So. Mm-hmm. Instantly, you're like, are you ever going to be a good guy? And yeah, he's a good guy in films like Shoot Fighter and Shoot Fighter 2. But going back to this.
Street Fighter?
Shoot Fighter.
What?
Shoot Fighter.
Shoot Fighter. Oh, okay. Sorry, you were saying that like it's a movie everybody's heard of. I have no idea what... I was like, is he talking about Street Fighter, the movie? Was there a sequel? No, Shoot Fighter.
He's the sensei of... I love that. Look at this fucking... We just got on a diatribe. He's the sensei of the kid from Karate Kid, Johnny Lawrence.
Okay, yeah.
Johnny Lawrence goes to Mexico to fight in an underground tournament run by Martin Cove, John Kreese.
Amazing.
And then Chong Li, the sensei, has to go and rescue him because he beat Martin Kreese years and years ago. Martin Kreese now wants to... Martin Cove wants to fight Bolo Young again.
Fantastic. Wasn't aware of these films. See, this is all just Rob warming up for the legacy sequence when he tells us all about the follow-ups to Bloodsport.
And they did Shoot Fighter 2. But, sorry, so Bolo Young is in my loves because that dude is a clear villain, looks like a villain, acts like a villain.
Yeah, really looks the part.
He's in my hates because of his weird arm pumping, not in line with any rhythm or anything. Like it's just weird.
It's just completely out of time. It's terrible.
Van Damme is another love. He's good in this film. He he is buying into the Frank Dukes story, I think. Like,
100%, 100%. And why not? You can see, again, I think he's a better actor by the time he gets to even Kickboxer, because he's been in a few films. You mentioned he's had a small part in, like, he was in No Retreat, No Surrender, but this was his first kind of leading role. We're going to turn you into a star. And his acting is occasionally questionable, but he does enough for sure. Because what he does have is charisma and screen presence, which are the important things.
I'm going to say my other love is the fact that everyone bought into the Frank Dukes story.
Yeah, that is awesome. Yeah, this film doesn't get made unless everybody's like, oh, that sounds totally legit. Let's do it.
Yep, so they're my loves.
Cool. In terms of hates, Janice is pretty lame. She flip-flops all the time, kind of does my head in by the end of the film. Chong Li's sense of rhythm, so exactly the same as what you said. And young Jean-Claude Van Damme and his accent, and his choice of sportswear tops, of course, which are just completely out of the question. But terrible acting by that kid. I still can't believe there was a voiceover and that was the voiceover. I was like, the only thing I'll say is I actually buy the accent as being a young Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah.
But I don't think the kid's quite young enough either. No. Like, yeah, it's all pretty bad. That whole sequence is terrible.
That kid looks like a 30-year-old man. He just does not look.
Well, that's the thing, right? And obviously we'll get to it into, like, whether you would recommend this to other people. Like, that whole sequence is pretty front-loaded in the film. The start is the worst bit of this film, 100%. Yeah. It gets really good once they get to the tournament. But that whole bit with the kids, the training sequence is pretty bad. If you hadn't seen this film before and you're watching, like, the first 15, 20 minutes, you're like, man, this is fucking rough. You have to get through that if you haven't seen it before, because it gets awesome.
Yeah.
But those are my hates. That was more succinct, I thought, by my standards at least.
My hates, I'm going to stick to your original remit. I've already said Bolo Young. Mm-hmm. Forrest Whitaker, Leah Ayres playing Janice, Donald Gibb playing Jackson, and young Frank.
Mm-hmm.
They're all in my hates.
Yeah. That's all good. I actually quite like Forrest Whitaker in this film, but I will accept it. Alternative titles. Tell me somebody had the common sense to call this film Kumite, because that's what it should have been called. Bloodsport's a fine title, but it should have been called Kumite. Somewhere in the world, this movie's called Kumite, right?
No.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
No.
I thought that was a given.
No. But we got some great names.
All right, go for it.
Argentina, the Great White Dragon.
That's not bad.
Nope. Bulgaria, Bloody Sport.
That's bad. Yeah, that's really bad.
The French-Canadian title, All Shots Are Allowed.
Oh, no, don't care for that.
Colombia, Bloody Contact.
No, again, it's probably a translation thing, but it doesn't work in English.
Yeah. Denmark, Bloodsport, Fight to the Death.
That's fine.
Finland, Bloodsport, Until the End.
Yeah, again, all kind of like unnecessary. They just sound like sequels to films that don't exist.
Germany, Bloodsport, A True Story.
That's my favorite for sure. I would have it Bloodsport, A True Story, like a Ron Burgundy, add a question mark. A true story? I'm Ron Burgundy?
Greece, Until the Final Four.
Again, they sound like Stan Bush song titles to me. That's the big issue.
Italy was No Holds Barred.
Well, they can't do that. That's already a film.
Yeah, I haven't actually checked what Italy is for the actual No Holds Barred. I wonder if that's something.
I'd love it if No Holds Barred was called Bloodsport and they just swapped them out. That'd be fantastic.
Vietnam is Bloody Arena.
Yeah.
My absolute favorite is Peru. Right? Never Back Down, Never Give Up 3.
Yeah, that's the best one for sure.
In all of my research, I couldn't find Never Back Down, Never Give Up 1 or 2. So
for good reason. They don't fucking exist.
Yeah. So they've literally just called this Never Back Down, Never Give Up. Like Germany had Party Tiger. So I thought, oh, Peru's got their own little version. So I wonder what Never Back Down, Never Give Up 1 is, or Never Back Down, Never. But they don't exist.
So they haven't got their kind of German equivalent of like the unofficial martial arts extended universe, where they just kind of like, we're just going to connect these films, even though there's no connection. They haven't bothered with that. They just like, we're just going to call this film 3.
Yeah, literally, Never Back Down, Never. Like maybe there is a 1 or 2, but I can't find it anywhere.
I hope they don't exist. Let's just leave it at that, and just assume they don't. And that it's somebody who's just like, let's just call it 3 because it sounds like it's really popular and it's doing really well. So this is a successful franchise, is what it is.
Yeah.
But none of them are called Kumite.
No.
Oh, for fuck's sake! Never mind. All right. Do you have any facts for this one?
I have a few.
Cool. Go for it. Other than all the non-facts that are Frank Dukes, of course. That could be our non-fact section. It's just everything he said.
Yeah. Well, so Frank Dukes was the fight coordinator for this film. And when Van Damme was cast, Dukes announced that Van Damme wasn't nearly in good enough shape and put him through a 3-month training program. Van Damme, a world championship martial artist in his own right, called it the hardest training of his life. I mean,
just the audacity of it. He's come in, he's making everything up. You find Jean-Claude Van Damme absolutely cut to shreds, a former, martial arts champion and movie star. And you're like, dude, you're not in good enough shape. You're going to have to do what I say. It's just like, he just kept going. He just kept going, Frank Dukes. The ultimate bullshit meister.
Yeah. Bernard Mariano was actually knocked out by Van Damme with his elbow.
Dude, I wanted to check. I should have checked that up, and I'm glad you have, because rewatching this film, that sequence when he turns around and elbows him in the face, I was like, God damn, like he caught him there. Like you see the contact, and some films, of course, like they're just lunatics. Like if you go watch The Raid, you're like, man, they are making contact all the time. And they've obviously just agreed to it. There's no other sense in the film of anyone really making genuine contact except for that elbow from Van Damme, which obviously catches him in the face. So yeah, I'm not surprised they knocked him out. A reverse spinning elbow will do that to a man.
Just ask Chris Jericho. That's his new finisher in AEW? But that's by the by.
That is an aside for sure.
Yeah. Midway's hit video game Mortal Kombat took inspiration from the film. Jean-Claude Van Damme was the character for Johnny Cage. They even had like you said,
the move and stuff. Yeah. I mean, this film basically is a video game. It already is.
Van Damme helped edit the film so it could be released. Now, I want to know the mess it was before Van Damme got hold of it, that it couldn't be released.
Yeah, because as I said, like that might have made more sense. Like, as I mentioned, the director, Newt Arnold, if all I knew was that he directed those two films, Hands of a Stranger and Bloodthirst, which I've not seen, but they look schlocky and they don't have amazing reviews. You're like, I can maybe get it. But this guy's clearly got talent because of the other films he's worked on. So I don't get the idea that he would have a movie that just wasn't ready. Unless, of course, they've just got some absolute hack as what's called an editor. Sorry, I just couldn't get the word out. So yeah, that sounds like a strange one to me. And again, why Jean-Claude Van Damme? He's relatively new to the industry. Like, why is he editing this fucking film? I don't know. Very strange.
Ray Jackson does not use any recognized martial art at any point in the film.
No, he doesn't. He's just big, aggressive, and swearing. He looks like an 80s wrestler, is what he looks like. He looks like he's got a very strong Hacksaw Jim Duggan vibe. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
He actually reminds me a lot. Like if you're going to do a modern day remake of this film, David Harbour would just be. He could go straight into the Jackson role. Is it David Harbour? Is that his name from Stranger Things? Yeah, and Hellboy and all that nonsense. He feels like he's got the same kind of vibe about him.
So what was I then? Obviously, you've said that Van Damme does 7 splits. Frank Dukes never has and does not hold any of the world records listed at the end of the film.
Well, yeah, some of the world records, I'm like, how are they even recognizing those in an underground fighting tournament in Kowloon World City? It doesn't make any sense. Like the fastest punch, it all sounds so incredibly technical. It's, again, because it's all made up. Of course.
Speaking of made up, the Dim Mak is actually a purely fictional martial arts move. I mean, no shit, Sherlock. Do you know what I mean?
I know. Nobody was doing any research for this film whatsoever. Basically, they let Frank Dukes on set, and he was running the show, and he was just like, "Well, basically everyone's washed their hands of it." So, well, this guy knows what he's talking about because he was there. It's based on him. So he's just kept saying stuff, and they just kept putting it in the film. And of course, it's all nonsense. It's all fictional, but it's turned into a pretty entertaining film. So it's fine, I guess.
Both Roy Chow and Bolo Young were in Enter the Dragon, playing similar roles of mentor and secret martial arts tournament opponent, respectively. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of Enter the Dragon connotation.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of crossover with this film, for sure. Anything else?
According to Frank Dukes, the character played by Donald Gibb was based on an ex-biker and jiu-jitsu practitioner, Richard Robinson.
Why not? Yeah. But he clearly couldn't fight, that's for sure. There's no sign that he knows any jiu-jitsu, that's for sure.
What else have I got here? Jackson, Dukes, Hussein, and Chong Li are the only Kumite fighters with dialogue. Yeah, the rest just get their ass kicked. Chong is Israeli army slang for brand new soldier. That's the best I'm giving you.
No,
Yeah,
fair enough.
That's the last one. That's why you get
That's fair enough. In terms of legacy, beyond its impact on video games, which we will, of course, get to, and for putting JCVD on the map, I think a lot of people would still argue that, I'm not, again, arguing that it's his best movie, I think is a bit of a stretch, but for a lot of people, it's still their favorite Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, and for good reason. Van Damme's
favorite movie is of his own as well.
Is it really? Yeah, that doesn't surprise, because again, it is ludicrous, but it's got its place. Is this kind of this relic of a different era, and you're not getting films like it. And I prefer Kickboxer, but they try and turn Kickboxer into more of a movie. This really is an 80s martial arts movie at its heart, but it's a really entertaining one. So I totally get that. I already mentioned the fact that this movie led directly to the UFC, and Art Davey and Rory and Gracie, the fans of the UFC, seeing this and then thinking, well, why don't we actually do this and put it, unlike the Kumite, we can confirm that the UFC does indeed exist, that this actually happened. But of course, the big thing with the legacy is its sequels, which I will leave to you, sir. How many sequels are there for this film?
There's 3 and a possible remake.
Well, a remake is does this film need, again, I would argue, other than my idea for having David Harbour playing Jackson, I'm like, I don't think this film needs a remake, because I don't think it works nowadays in the same way. I think this film works because it was made specifically in 1988.
I'll start off with the remake then. So there was a 2016 film called Lady Blood Fight, which is about... Lady Blood Fight. It's on Amazon. Sure. It's on Amazon Prime. So if you get a chance, it's about an American fighter who travels to Hong Kong to participate in the all-woman Kumite.
Oh, that does sound like a remake. That sounds like a very 2017, 2018 remake when they're like, we're just going to take films and put women in it, which is a little bit ill-conceived, but, nerds online got very upset about it, didn't they?
It's, to be fair, I have watched it, obviously, and I didn't mind it. I thought it was all right. It's just a bunch of women fighting and having a story. It was fine.
Well, again, if you basically just put a tournament up on the screen and it's well choreographed, generally speaking, I'll watch it, basically.
Yeah.
Well, because that's the thing. It's like, I mentioned the fact that one of my favorite action movies of all time is The Raid. The only thing with that film, they really do just go, listen, we've got to get upstairs. That's it. That is the plot. And then they go and kick the shit out of people for 90 minutes. It's fucking amazing.
It is.
There is no plot to that film. The problem with The Raid 2 has some of the most unbelievable action sequences ever committed to film.
But too much
plot. It had the same problem as John Wick 4. It was too fucking long. It had too much plot. And you're like, just get to the action sequences. And that's why The Raid was so goddamn fantastic, and it's the reason that Bloodsport is still so watchable today, because they're like, we'll just about have enough plot, but really we're just here to watch people fight, which is cool.
So, not in the tradition of Kickboxer, there is no brother to Frank Dukes or anything like that. You got a new Daniel Bernhardt. Now, I've known him for a while, because obviously I've known him from Bloodsport, but a lot of people might recognize him from the original John Wick. He was he was the bad guy's bodyguard who had a good fight with John Wick in the night.
Yeah.
So he plays a guy named Alex Cardo, and he's a thief that gets caught trying to rob Pat Morita.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, he gets sent to prison, and then he's trained by James Hong from Big Trouble in Little China.
So you get some pretty interesting names in these straight to VHS follow-ups, don't you? For sure. He's
trained by called Master Sun, teaches him a superior fighting style called the Iron Hand. Awesome. It just so happens that the awful prison guard is entered into the next Kumite, because this was called Bloodsport, the next Kumite.
Okay.
Alex is able to enter it as well and has a showdown with that. But what's funny is, I've seen this film twice now, I believe, and I don't remember Jackson being in it, but Jackson's in it. He's third build.
Did you actually enjoy the film from what you can remember?
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was
fair enough. Fair enough.
It's a good film. It's. I like these straight to DVD action, because it does.
I can't watch a lot of them. I think they're so poorly made. So many of them. I'm just I can't. I've tried with a few, because, like you say, they occasionally show up on like Amazon Prime and stuff like that. I know it's not a martial arts film, but I was like, I'm going to give The Sandlot 2 a chance. Because, I love The Sandlot kids. We did a podcast on that. I was like, I'm going to give The Sandlot... I watched 10 minutes of it. I'm just like, It's just bad. It's just bad. It's poorly made. I know there's fun to be had in these films, especially as you say when you start mentioning the cast. But I often struggle to get past just how poor they are. And I know I'm just throwing a blanket over all these straight to DVD movies, and I know that's not fair because some of them are actually genuinely good.
Yeah.
But I'm not willing to do the groundwork, which you are. The heroes out there who are willing to wade through the shit, because there's so much shit to wade through, to get to the gold. But God bless you, someone's got to do it.
So Bloodsport 3 brings back Alex Cardo after he won the last Kumite. Spoilers for any of these films, by the way.
I think we'll be fine.
He won the last Kumite.
I think it would be a great spoiler. It's like, he went out in the second round, and that was the end of the film.
Pat Morita's back, and he gets Alex to come back and enter a new Kumite that's being run by John Rhys Davis.
But I tell you what, though, you start saying these names, I'm like, if you told me it's like, there's a film, it's Bloodsport 2, and let's be clear, the title to Bloodsport 2 is a really cool title. Yeah. And then you start naming the cast, I'm like, this kind of sounds like a film I want to see, for fuck's sake.
So Alex has to go through the next Kumite, obviously, proving that he's worthy. And one of the guys he fights is Chad Stahelski as Max Omega. Chad Stahelski, awesome. Who directed John Wick.
John Wick, yeah. It keeps coming back to John Wick. And my complaints about John Wick 4 and why it's not that good. Although I just have to ask, this is a complete offshoot. It just popped into my head. I went to see Renfield yesterday at the cinema. So this really is left field. And it was another one of those films. I was like Creed, John Wick 4, Renfield. I was really looking forward to all those films. Like, man, I hope they're good. They all got amazing reviews. And I went to see all three of them, and they were all vaguely disappointing, which is a bit of a shame. But my point is, in a largely empty cinema, there were three people who obviously by choice decided to sit not only in the front row, but in the corner of the front row. Is that a sign of mental illness as far as you're concerned?
Yeah.
Absolutely right. When they left at the end of the film, I was like, I've got to see what this is fucking like. I went down, I sat in their seats, and it's unwatchable. It's insane. They were so fucking, not only are you 2 inches from a 70-foot cinema screen, but they're also on an angle. What the fuck is wrong with these people? I was furious. I was furious.
I don't mind the angle. One of my favorite seats is to sit over the entrance, the balcony, because I got long legs. I like to sit there, and I mean, who am I talking to? You're 25 foot tall, but
of course,
I got long legs, so I like to stretch out. So sitting over, that's fine. That's on an angle, it's fine. But to sit in the front row, I've only ever done it once because the cinema was full.
Yeah, I get it. If the cinema is full, some poor sods have to sit up front. That's fine. But like I said, the cinema had, I would say it was 20% full, less than that, 15% at best. And they had clearly booked their tickets, because obviously you book it all online and all that. And they had said, I want to sit in the front row and I want to sit in the corner. And I was like, I can't get my fucking head around that.
The front row film we had to sit in and do it as well was the worst film to do it. I can't believe it was packed, but Wanted.
Oh, that's intense.
In the front row, looking up, watching just a lot of blurry action. But
that's a. I mean, it's never good at the best time, but hands do it for that. But yeah, I was sitting in row like D yesterday because I like to sit in the middle. That's my main thing. It's like I just want to be somewhere in the middle. And I was like, all right, that's about as close as I'd want to get. And I was comfortable there, but that was borderline. I was like, I would not want to be a row closer than this. But like I said, to be in the front row out of choice, absolute madness. Sorry, that was a complete aside, but it just kind of jumped into my head at just how mental I thought that was. I wanted to make sure it wasn't just me.
So we've got one more film. Okay, It brings back Daniel Bernhardt, but not as Alex. He's a different person now. He's Agent.
But the same. Okay, sure, yeah, that's fine.
He's Agent John Keller. This is called Bloodsport 4: The Dark Kumite.
Again, cool title. I'll give it that.
So he's Agent John Keller, who goes undercover into the tough prison known as the Fuego Penal Prison to find out about the corpses of prisoners disappearing without a trace. Basically, it's a prison kumite.
Fair enough. But with the same actor playing a different character, which is bananas.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, that was the legacy. That is the questionable legacy to this film.
All three. Well, actually, all four. All three sequels plus the remake. They do exactly what they need to do. You have a guy training to fight. He then fights. Or she.
Yeah, that's fine. I guess you like. I don't think it necessarily needs to be called Bloodsport because you just want it to be a tournament film. But again, I have no issue with the sequels existing. The idea of remaking it, though, as I said, I have that issue connected to the fact that I feel like this movie belongs in the 80s, and I'm just not sure if it works in the same way. But
well, I mean, they did try it even up to like 2018 was the last time they tried to.
Oh, of course, there's always going to be someone. I mean, I don't know who the writes it with because obviously this was famously a Canon Films movie, which we've done a lot of recently, a lot of Canon films. So whoever has the rights, they're like, listen, it's still a recognizable brand. When people hear Bloodsport, I was like, I remember fucking watching Bloodsport. And, again, everyone likes tournament movies. So I wouldn't be surprised if they remake it, but we'll see. In terms of the score and soundtrack, it's basically exactly what I said for Kickboxer a couple of weeks ago. It was the score is by Paul Herzog, who only did a couple of films, but I think he does really good work in both this and Kickboxer. And the soundtrack is largely by Stan Bush. And yes, it's a Stan Bush soundtrack. We mentioned the fact that there are 5 montages. There are some absolutely great tracks. I don't think any of them are genuine world beaters. You think of like the best Stan Bush songs, you hear a couple of words like, oh, that's from Rocky IV, or that's from whatever. I don't think there's really, other than the Kumite song, a film where you're like, oh, well, that's the Bloodsport song. But it's all perfectly decent, so it is what it is. In terms of video games, there is unbelievably no official video game, but obviously Mortal Kombat is the fancy version of this movie. And you already mentioned the whole Johnny Cage thing is just Jean-Claude Van Damme. They have the move and everything. In reality, though, if I was going to make a Bloodsport video game, I wouldn't go with Mortal Kombat because that's actually much more flashy than this. The closest thing to it is probably, and I keep going back to Sega, is Virtua Fighter. Because Virtua Fighter, it has a ring, you can get knocked off the side. It's a bunch of much more grounded characters, and they all fight with different styles, but it is a more technical fighting game. They've recently re-released Virtua Fighter 5 as Final Showdown, and it has DLC where you can dress the characters up basically as Tekken characters or as Yakuza characters from the other Sega game. Why not have DLC of Bloodsport? You could totally just change some of the characters, give them almost just different skins and be like, well, that's the Frank Dukes character, that's Chong Li, that's the fucking kickboxing dude. So yeah, I wouldn't go, the obvious one is Mortal Kombat, but in reality, Virtua Fighter is a much closer experience to what Bloodsport is on screen. I think you just make a more violent version, basically. So, or in honor of its place in the movie, we could release an updated version of 1984's Karate Champ titled Karate Champ Bloodsport. We could do that instead.
I would have gone with Pit Fighter.
Oh, dude, that's a fucking great shout. I have not thought of Pit Fighter for so long.
Pit Fighter, yeah. I remember having that on, I can't remember what...
It was on the fucking Game Gear. Yeah. They ported that into everything. And it's basically the game where, like, the offshoot of Mortal Kombat, wasn't it? Because it used, like, the same digitized fighters, didn't it?
Yeah, and you did. So they had 3 playable characters, didn't they? They had, was it Buzz? Who was
I remember Buzz,
wrestler. So that was obviously your
Jackson.
You had Ty, who was an agile kickboxing champion.
Jean-Claude, of course.
And then Kato, a quick 3rd-degree black belt. So just
make a slight change, just make him slightly larger. You could actually almost change around and make. Oh no, because Buzz has to be Jackson, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But yeah, you've got to get Chong Li in there. But yeah, Pit Fighter is a game where it was a great concept. And I loved it back in like 1993 or whenever it was made because it was like violent and cool and stuff. But it was actually quite a bad video game. Yeah, but the name still exists. So, if you're going to bring back Pit Fighter, bring it back as Pit Fighter Bloodsport. So yeah, I thought I was really onto a winner with Virtua Fighter, but I think you actually win this week with Pit Fighter for sure. And I'm usually the one with the deep cuts, man. Pit Fighter is a pretty deep cut, dude.
It is, but it's dark, it's gritty, it has 100%. That Kumite feel. So.
It's kind of like Pit Fighter. The only thing I'll say is that the actual game is closer to Fight Club in terms of the tone almost and the visuals. Yeah. But yeah, it would only take a slight amendment to turn that into Bloodsport, the video game, for sure.
Absolutely.
Cool. In terms of recommendations and scores, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. It's a middle of the road. It's a 3, but it's a strong 3. Yeah. I mean, we called out a lot of this film, but like you said, it's fun to watch. It's fun to have. So as a nostalgia kick as well. Yeah, definitely. So it is a 3. Recommendations are hard though for this film.
Yeah,
because it's one of those things again that you're not just going to recommend it to anyone. If you're a fan of Van Damme films, you've already seen it. If you're a fan of martial arts films, you've already seen it. So it's not like it's something you can just go ahead and just willy-nilly recommend. And yes, I said
no. It's a weird one because, as I mentioned earlier, like the bad stuff is front-loaded. There's a lot of bad acting, similar to like Kickboxer. The stuff at the start of that movie is actually the rougher stuff. But it's if somebody has a vague like notion of 80s movies, but they've never seen the Jean-Claude Van Damme movies or they haven't watched too much martial arts, I feel like you could maybe just about recommend it with some caveats. Because again, they get to the tournament so quick. And as long as they know they're watching an 80s martial arts film, there's still a lot to like here because it's so breezy, it's so ludicrous that you can still enjoy it. In the same way that, with Kickboxer, it was kind of like you can kind of recommend it, but it comes with caveats. I actually think this film is maybe easier to recommend, despite the fact that it's not as good a movie, because it is so silly, because it is so 80s. They're like, oh, if you just want to watch like a really cool 80s martial arts films, I'm like, watch Bloodsport. Because you're like, I was like, the start's a bit shitty, but the bad stuff is in that kind of like almost so bad it's good. Like the stuff with the young JCVD, it's so ridiculous. Like you would never get that nowadays because someone's like, dude, the acting's so fucking bad. But then you get to the tournament pretty quickly and all that's like largely holds up. So yes, I'm exactly the same as you. 3 stars, but it's a strong 3 stars. As I said, it's not as good technically and objectively a movie as Kickboxer, which we also, I think, both gave 3 stars, but it's super fun. So it's a mega flawed, super fun 3-star movie that we would recommend with caveats, should we say. So yeah, completely on the same page as you do.
So, all right, then, so we both agree with that one. I'm interested now because I'm not actually sure I'm never sure what we're doing the week ahead. So what are we doing next week?
Well, we're a bit of a shift, much more modern film, but we're doing, I guess you would call it the first modern day comic book movie, I think is,
can I guess?
People would argue with that, but yeah, go for it.
It's Blade, isn't it?
It is absolutely Blade. A lot of people, when they think of that, they think of X-Men, but the reality is Blade was a few years earlier, and I think it proved to a lot of people that say, oh, you could make a successful comic book movie. I know some people will say, oh, what about Tim Burton's Batman? I feel like that's from a different era. I always feel like Tim Burton's Batman is more closely connected to, say, 1977's Richard Donner's Superman movie. Whereas this, I feel like belongs, even though, we're talking like nearly 25 years ago now, it still to me feels like a relatively modern superhero film.
I mean, what it does, and we'll talk about it more next week, but what it does very well is it could be ageless, this film.
Yeah.
Like because Blade, it's all about the dark underground. It fits in anything. You could say it was 25 years ago, but it could feel like 2023 now. It's
I don't like that's the thing though. I've not seen Blade for a while. Like, and again, we'll go into this in more detail next week, but the opening sequence I think is one of the coolest character introductions of all time. And one of my famous cinematic experiences ever was, and again, I'll save it for next week about how I ended up watching this at the cinema. But that sequence in the club, I remember seeing that and be like, this is one of the coolest things I've ever fucking seen. Like, it was unfucking believable. I'm almost worried that it's not going to be so cool. Or maybe the soundtrack, the bum, 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 bum. Like, I remember at the time being like, oh, this is amazing. Is that going to age this film now? I don't know.
I don't think it will. I think you'll be very surprised. But to be fair,
I hope so.
I think it's a great shout. I'm really, like you said, I haven't watched it for a while either, but I have fond memories of it, and I'm really looking forward to picking it back.
Well, they already made it on about, like, obviously they're going to remake it, and I think putting it in the MCU is a big mistake. I actually think this is, and again, I'll end up invariably repeating this next week, is a great argument for Marvel to copy what DC have done. And you rarely say that, but where DC are having their Elseworlds thing. So you can have the MCU, but you can also have like the Joker, or you can have the Batman, and they sit in their own separate universes. They're still vaguely connected by it all sits under DC, but it's DC Elseworlds. If ever Marvel were going to do a Marvel Elseworlds film, and I honestly think now's the time for them to start doing it, because we're so far down the line with Marvel films. Like, start just making Marvel films. You can have them in the multiverse thing, but don't have Blade be connected to anything else. Make an ultra-violent Blade movie and just have it be its own thing.
And now they're doing Blade, Punisher, Daredevil, Deadpool. They're doing all of these currently. They're all in, I mean, some of them are TV shows, like Punisher's coming back into the Daredevil TV show. But yeah, get him on the Elseworlds thing. Get him a little bit more gritty, a little bit more violent.
Yeah.
You're going to start watering them down. These characters they did it. They watered down Moon Knight. Completely
they did, and
watered down.
That is the thing now. Like, people, you forget forget that Marvel started it in 2007. And it was weird. I was hearing some people being critical. It's like, oh, I can't get into Marvel because it started, like, if you're 20 years old now, it started when you were a kid. And if you didn't start watching it then, there's so much like backfill to kind of like, am I going to commit to this? It's like, just create them, just let them be their own movie, just like their standalone movie. It doesn't all have to connect forever. So I'm a little concerned about what Blade, the remake, will be because of how brilliant the original was. And again, just to talk about perfect casting, like, how are you going to do better than Wesley Snipes in this fucking film? He absolutely, I was going to say he slays. That's just far too on the nose. But needless to say, I have very fond movies of Blade. I was a little bit concerned. You've allayed my fears somewhat. So I am looking forward to revisiting this film. So a bit of a mood change from Bloodsport to 1998.
98. Blade? You also made me feel sad saying that I was 23, but he's 24 when Iron Man came out. And I am now 40.
Yeah, we won't go into that, Jesus Christ. I don't like to do age things anymore. I don't like maths anymore. It's just very upsetting. Yeah. But yeah, thank you for joining us for Bloodsport, and do join us next week for Blade, apparently. So apparently I chose it. What the fuck am I talking about?
Apparently, like it just came out of the blue.
Yeah, what the fuck? I really gave it some thought. What the fuck? But yeah, thanks for listening as always, guys. Oh, and before we forget, here is Rob with all the finer details. Got to get through those, dude.
Yeah, so basically you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at HeyYouGuys80s. We're also on email at HeyYouGuys80s@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us any recommendations, any corrections or omissions we may have missed from any of the films that we've covered. Just get them in. And also, if you could, please leave us some 5-star reviews. That would really help us. And we'd like to thank, as always, Darry Fletcher at Darry Doodles for the fantastic artwork that we're now producing. Thanks for that, mate.
Cheers, Darry.
Yeah. And thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week.
Cheers. Bye.